Welcome back to Observing the Sabbath. I'm Nathaniel Molnar, and we are continuing on our look at the 1970 Black Sabbath album, Paranoid. This is their second studio album, and we have gone all the way up to Electric Funeral, and now, today, we're going to be listening to Hand of Doom. I apologize about the length between postings for this video series. I got involved in some personal things, including an internship that I just started, so I got a little bit behind on Observing the Sabbath, but we're back, we're continuing on through. Don't worry, we're going to continue our look at Black Sabbath. So we're going to finish up the Paranoid album here pretty soon, and then we're going to move on to Master of Reality. But first, we do have to finish Paranoid. We are going to be listening to Hand of Doom. As always, just know, this is not me listening to the song for the first time. I've heard these songs hundreds of times before. This is me listening to the song and giving my commentary and giving my thoughts on the song and on the music and on Black Sabbath as a whole as we move through these songs. So without any further ado, let's get started, and we're going to listen to Hand of Doom. And now. I love this slow open. It really goes back into this idea that I've been talking about all along with Black Sabbath, that they have these different speeds, like they'll do the slow parts and then they'll do the fast parts. They kind of have this differing pace all the way through their music within each song, and I think Hand of Doom is a very good early example of that sort of approach that they take. I talked before about how Paranoid is probably the most political Black Sabbath album, mainly because of War Pigs, and you have Electric Funeral, which is about nuclear war. Hand of Doom is the other one on there that's really political, but it's not to the same degree as, say, War Pigs or Electric Funeral. I think those are a lot more blatant about it, whereas Hand of Doom is more about, it's about heroin use, and it's about veterans coming back from Vietnam, which War Pigs also kind of tackles Vietnam, but you have veterans coming back from Vietnam, and as we know kind of historically, they were not really met with any sort of, they didn't have the same sort of celebration that veterans from World War II had. You know, that was more seen as more of a just war, whereas Vietnam was war that had a lot of iffy parts about why we were even fighting it. And so the veterans from Vietnam were not very welcome. They lost a lot of things when they came back, and there was a lot of heroin use within the Vietnam veterans, and so this song really kind of tackles that element of it. But it's done in a little more of a subtle way than, say, War Pigs or Electric Funeral, which I think, for the betterment of those songs, those are very flagrantly political songs, whereas this, it's a little bit more obscured, but it's still there. This whole part is probably my favorite of the song. Like, just the upbeat, like it kind of comes back up. Tony brings it home. You have the tempo change. You have the very slow start. It's like slower, it's methodical, it's a little more haunting. It's sort of reminiscent of their first song, Black Sabbath, in a very kind of similar way that it's very slow, and you kind of have more of a haunting Ozzy voice with that song. And then Hand of Doom, sort of the opening, has that. But then as you go into this part of the song, it kind of takes on more of a quality similar to that of the song Paranoid, or some of that other part. So it's really kind of, in a very interesting way, a blend between Sabbath of the original album and then sort of the Sabbath that came about within the recording of Paranoid. It kind of bridges the two together in a very interesting way, and I think through the sort of contrasting parts of the song, where you have that slower start and then you have this part that kind of comes in, those are very distinctly contrasted within a song, and I think that all the more contrasts the difference and sort of the evolution that Sabbath has had within the very short amount of months that separated Black Sabbath and Paranoid. And as I've mentioned before, like, you see this a lot, especially in Sabotage. Once we get into the Sabotage album, I'll talk more about this. But this idea of just, like, stark tempo changes within each song. Like, you have really heavy, fast parts, and you have much more slower, melodic parts. A lot of that you see in Sabotage, and you definitely see that in Hand of Doom. And I think that's very evident of Sabbath's whole approach to all their albums has been constantly pushing the envelope, constantly trying to do new things and trying to branch out and grow and do new things. They're never trying to stay the same, you know. They're never trying to be exactly what they were on the last album, on the last song, or even in the last riff. You know, every single element, every single second of every single Sabbath song over the course of the 8 albums was all about change. And I really like that element about them. And you definitely hear that here with Hand of Doom. I love the drums in this. It's got the great, like, bass riff. Do, 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 do. And then you have the drums. You can kind of hear some of the blues element coming in. That was sort of the foundational basis for Sabbath and main influence.
Your eyes no longer see life's reality.
It goes from very quiet and not having too much power to it to very quickly gaining a lot of power and strength. I think that's symbolic of Sabbath as in general. Their ability to kind of be sort of far quieter and smaller, and then in an instant grow to be this giant powerhouse. And I'm not necessarily talking commercially or in terms of popularity, but within even the music itself, they have that quality.
Death and starts to weep.
Ozzy's great on this track. His voice fits this so perfectly. And we go back to the quiet outro. Alright. And that is the end of Hand of Doom. As I kind of said throughout the song, I think one of the biggest elements of that song is how you have the very quiet part and then immediately go into the heavier, louder parts, which is very symbolic and evident in Sabbath's later works. They do that a lot, but you kind of see the seeds of that. And I do think you do have that interesting sort of contrast between the sound and the feel of the first album with the sound and feel of the second album, because as we're seeing as we go through, they change a lot in the very short amount of time from when Black Sabbath is released to when Paranoid is recorded and then ultimately put out. They go through a big change in terms of the sound of Ozzy's voice to the overall musical direction and sound of the band. And I know that when they were first playing shows and whatnot, they were kind of experimenting with a lot of different things. They're experimenting with Black Sabbath, the song, which ultimately set the direction of the band entirely. But they were also playing not Paranoid. They were also playing War Pigs, and they were playing Iron Man, and they were kind of workshopping these songs. And so it all kind of grew outside of this sort of basis that they were creating in terms of the songs that they were making and playing at shows, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, having these, they really, and this is really evident when you go back and you watch a lot of the live footage of Black Sabbath. They were tailoring a lot of what they were creating and writing to the live audience. You know, I don't think they were necessarily, and I'm not presuming to be able to get inside the heads of people I've never met, but I don't think they were really working on this music as much to be able to, for someone 50 years later to be able to put it on and listen to it and say X, Y, and Z about it. I don't think that's really what they had in mind when they were creating this music. What they were focused on was the shows that they were going to be playing, because they create one album and then they, for the next however many months, they're touring the world playing at least one show a night, if not several a night. They're the ones who have to play that music over and over and over and over and over again. So it would just make sense that they are tailoring the album and the music that they are creating in general for the live show, for the live audience, that's what they have in mind, because that's the thing that they're going to be doing for the next however many months it will be. And so it makes sense. And so what I find interesting looking at their music, as someone who has pretty much up until this point really experienced and digested it through the lens of listening to an audio recording decades later, to kind of look at it through the lens of a live performance, a live audience, and that's what they were sort of targeting when they created it in the first place. It's interesting that the songs are as dynamic as they are and sort of go against the convention, because I guess that was part of the larger appeal. To watch a live performance of Hand of Doom and just have that one bass riff just kind of very quietly going, and you kind of have everyone in the audience silent, you know, and then to go into the roar of the main part of the song, to kind of have those quieter parts when you're thinking about a live audience. I think that shows a lot of just ingenuity on their part and innovation to really kind of capitalize on these moments. And they know if we go quiet here, we're going to get the audience. They're going to be listening at our every sound, that they're going to be drawn in. And then we hit them hard with this really loud part. And they're kind of architecting theater in that way. You know, it kind of feels a little more operatic, you know. And so I think it's a very interesting way to kind of look at the band as a whole and the music, especially their earlier music, which was all sort of kind of derived from live performances that they were doing, and then the albums were made from that. And then subsequently, they kind of then made the album first and then played that at the live show. So you kind of have that reverse later on in their career. But anyways, those are my thoughts on Hand of Doom. My question is to you, what do you think? What do you think about Hand of Doom? Is it one of your favorite songs off of Paranoid? Is it one of your least favorite? Where does it rank in general? Leave me all of your thoughts in the comment section below. Once again, I'm Nathaniel Molnar. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe, and you can find Observing the Sabbath as a podcast version on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts as well. So until our next part of our Paranoid dive into the album, we are going to be looking at the instrumental, the very first true instrumental for Black Sabbath, Rat Salad. So until then, thank you for watching.